You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Matt Dawson. He's an author of a book called Strength in Surrender, When One Man's Expeditions to the World's Harshest Environments Can Teach You About Facing Your Fears and Living with Purpose. So we're talking to Matt Dawson. He's a M&A investment banker, corporate investor, and a small business operator. He's also an endurance athlete and holds world records for various athletic activities. So a polymath of a person, a Renaissance man. And so we're going to learn more. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for coming.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for the time. And listen, all my closest friends call me Dawson. So just feel free to call me Dawson.
Okay, I'll call you that. So yeah, Dawson, tell me a bit about your background. How did you go from being a normal human to someone going into these extreme environments?
Well, it's interesting is really it started around about 37 years old. And so you mentioned in that the read in there that I'm involved with investment banking. I've been doing that for about the last 20 years. I'm still a managing director with investment bank here in LA, focusing on mergers and acquisitions of about 30 million to around 250, 300 million. But when about 6 years ago, I'd reached a place in my life where I had a certain level of professional success, but I had just an emptiness inside of me, a darkness that had been there for some time and just continued to grow. And despite whatever I, earned or achieved or where I visited or what I purchased, it just continued to get worse. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I just felt increasingly isolated and disconnected from people. And at the same time, I lost my mother. My mother passed away. I broke up with a serious girlfriend and just knew it was time for a serious change in my life. And the magnitude of change I needed, wasn't going to take place by, reading a book or speaking with a therapist once a week or something like that. Like I needed a complete overhaul. So I traveled alone to Nepal and spent 3 weeks hiking around the Mount Everest region. And on that trip, I just came to understand that the reason I was so in such a bad place and so disconnected was I wasn't living with any sense of purpose. And my life was only about me, as I was living a very self-centered life rather than a service-centered life. And then came back and over the next couple of years, worked with a good friend of mine, Jay Jablonski. We built out Dawson's Peak Foundation, which is our current 501c3, and started putting in place our current project, where I've had a chance to set a handful full of world records, as you mentioned. But that was really kind of the start of everything.
What were some other extreme environments you've been to in addition to Everest?
Yeah, so it's with this current project, which is called 7 for Soldiers, and 100% of our net proceeds are benefiting Gary Sinise Foundation and Hope for the Warriors, 2 of the highest rated veteran charities in the country. On this current project, I've had the chance to climb the 7 summits, which is the highest peak on each continent. And then I skied to the South Pole, trekked across the Mojave Desert in Death Valley. I became the first person to do that solo unsupported, and then rowed a boat across the Atlantic Ocean. And I was able to achieve all that within 1 year. And the plan was also to go to the North Pole and then to fly a plane around the world during that same time period. But because of COVID and Russia, Ukraine, that, we were prevented from doing that. So we're still trying to get that rescheduled. And then the pole got canceled because of Russia, Ukraine. So since that time, I've had the chance to trek a longer distance, 330 miles across the Mojave Desert. And I got the record for the fastest ever crossing of the Mojave on foot. And hopefully this coming April, I'll have a chance to go back and finally finish off the North Pole.
Well, doing these things, has it made you feel more alive and more connected when you're not doing them? Or do you only feel like that when you are doing these things?
That's a very interesting question. And more times than not, I find that people want to compartmentalize things, whether it's good things or bad things. But I really think because we're primarily subconscious beings, we're not very good or we're completely unable to really compartmentalize things, thoroughly or exclusively or for long periods. So to that end, I think whatever we do in one facet of our life impacts other facets. And, you look at, say, climbing a mountain, and it's a very physical pursuit, but more than that, it's a mental, emotional pursuit. And this stuff really has served as a tool for me to explore and examine myself in a lot of different ways, to connect with myself in different ways. And because I've been able to do that, it's enabled me to connect to others in more ways and in better ways. So I've never felt more connected to people in a general sense, whether the people directly in my life or people I've never even met before, than I have now. So it's been a wonderful gift, that I've received from it.
Well, when you were doing these extreme things, were there times where you were actually in danger where, if it went on a little bit longer, you could have died?
Oh, there's no question. It's, whenever, look, that being said, that type of thing presents itself, I think, a lot more than we understand in our everyday lives. But, there are times, obviously when I was rowing a 21-foot boat, 3,100 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, and sometimes facing waves of 18 to 20 over 20 feet, that could have capsized me in a heartbeat. And I saw more times than I could count when I'm standing on the deck of the boat, looking up 10, 12 feet over my head or the wave coming in, that there's absolutely nothing I can do. That if it's going to take me, it's going to take me. Or if I'm on the side of a mountain at 20,000 feet, 25,000 feet, and if an avalanche were to come down or something were to let loose, there's so many things beyond your control. But what you just have to do is just focus, it really makes you focus on the world in front of you and just what we call making our world smaller. So just whatever I can immediately impact is my focus. Anything outside of that, I might be concerned about it, but I put it out of my mind as best I can because I really can't do anything about it.
Well, what else did you get from these experiences? I mean, like what drove you to do them in the first place? And after you did one, was it not enough? Like, why do another one? Why keep doing this?
Yeah, here's what it is I pursue these activities for a variety of reasons. I am looking to push my physical limits to understand kind of where that is, because far too often we all believe that our physical limits are these stone walls that we can see and understand. But I've found time and time again is when you start to reach these limits, these perceived limits, is there's nothing there. There's no physical barrier. Is that we can all push longer and harder. And it's astonishing what the human body is capable of. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this stuff is not just to be some guy running up a mountain or rowing an ocean, because, man, that's okay in a certain sense, but in a bigger sense, it really doesn't add anything to my life or to anyone else's. But it's an avenue for self-exploration. Is that the more things I do like this, the more I'm able to better understand and connect with myself, which has really elevated my life and my ability to connect with others. So really, that's why I'm doing a lot of these things. And in terms of, kind of the volume of them, we've packaged all these recent activities together in a single project, which is, as I mentioned earlier, 7 for Soldiers. So that's why there's been such a variety and number of them. But once the project is done, it's just, I've fallen in love with it. It's something that you almost become addicted to, like this growth. And I'm just always looking to push myself and to grow and into different ways. But more importantly, to use that and apply that in a service-oriented way where I can share my experiences with others, and hopefully they can take something away from what I've done, apply it to their life, to their journey, and then subsequently on down the line, and we all elevate each other together.
Are you taking former soldiers on these, experiences? Because what just flashed into my mind is it was some movie about some sniper like Bradley Cooper was, and then he got back and then he was like in the grocery store and he just was like, what's the point? Because it was just so different from the environment he was in, and it was really hard for him to adjust. So I could see if you took like former soldiers on these type of expeditions and everything, it would give them enough of a taste of what they used to go through that maybe they could handle normal life better.
Yeah, that's something we're looking to do kind of in the next iteration rather of our charity of Dawson's Peak Foundation, where we're looking at getting soldiers more directly involved. At this point, primarily what we're doing is we're funding different programs and initiatives and things like that through Hope for the Warriors and Gary Sneeze Foundation, where they do have physical activities that they pursue with the veterans. The type of activities that I've been doing, it's, you've got to train seriously on a nearly full-time or a full-time basis, which a lot of people can't do. But once this next April passes and we can find some different pursuits, more local pursuits or things where people don't have to train, so intensely, then we're certainly going to pull in, direct activities where we can bring these guys and gals along.
Yeah, because that's what flashed into my head that would be really helpful for them to adjust back to normal life. If they still could have some of these experiences and feel a little bit like they used to feel, it would help them.
That's one of the biggest challenges that they face, is to go kind of from that 100 to 0. And I know the scene you're talking about in American Sniper, where you're in one place and then a couple hours later, a couple days later, you're in just a completely different place. And it's just, your mind really can't wrap itself around the differences there. And so there's certainly programs like that are needed. It can be very beneficial for these folks.
So all the stuff you've done, is it right now, before you would do something like this, with veterans, let's say, is it just inspirational? Like, what is your whole Like, what is your work about nowadays? Do you feel like you're inspiring people by doing this, or what is the role of it?
Yeah, it's the mission of Dawson's Peak Foundation is to inspire the discovery and pursuit of individual purpose. And I think in today's age, we're losing that, is that we've never been more connected from a technological sense, but I think we've never been more disconnected in a personal sense. And I can just see this from observing, society and trends and people I'm talking to, things that I've experienced, where people are not living with a sense of purpose, where we're kind of self-aggrandizing ourselves, where we think a lot of people feel like they're the most important thing in the world and the world revolves around them. They want to get likes and followers. And it's just, we're barking up the wrong tree. It's about identifying our sense of purpose. And the way that comes about is by understanding that we all matter, but none of us are important. You're not important. I'm not important. My mom dying, is not important. None of us are, but we all matter. And that's a huge distinction because a lot of us don't understand that our lives impact everyone else. And because of that, we owe it to ourselves and to everyone else to maximize this unique gift that we all have and that we can all offer to the world, because the world needs us all to show up on a daily basis. And a lot of people are just starting to discount that and feel that their lives don't matter and that they don't matter and that purpose doesn't matter. And we're just trying to get through to them that it does, and they do, and we all do. And that's really what we're trying to inspire, with what we're doing. And the greatest change I've seen in my life is to consciously move from being self-centered to service-centered, where I make my life and my goals and my actions about more than myself. And that's been the biggest, bit of change that I've seen. And we're just trying to share that with others.
What kind of people have you seen really resonate with your message versus it falls flat? What kind of people are you attracting? Have you noticed?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And it's surprising it's kind of all over the board. We're not trying to be, all things to all people. We're not trying to be too kind of on the nose or too, rifle shot, but we're getting great response. It's our primary target demographic is probably, 25 to 45, 25 to 55, something like that. But between male and female, we're probably 60% male, 40% female. And, but it's surprising is that I'll get, DMs or emails or stuff like that from 65, 70-year-olds. And I'll get it from 15-year-olds, asking questions or say that they enjoyed this or enjoyed that. So it's been interesting to see that we're touching people that we never thought we would touch to the volume that we are and the types. But I think the message is resonating with folks and it's getting through and they're enjoying it.
I don't know, what kind of interactions do you have? Like, you have people that appreciate what you do, but what steps do you encourage people to take in their own lives? They don't need to go on these like crazy journeys that are death defying, but what can they do to help themselves feel more connected to the world, to feel more alive? Even small things.
I think the biggest thing that we can all do first is to get connected with ourselves. Because most of us, as soon as we wake up in the mornings, we're on a cell phone, then we turn on the radio or turn on the television, and it's just this constant stimulation and inundation of exterior stimuli. The first thing is to sit with yourself and to get quiet. We can all find 10 minutes a day. I don't care who you are. You can find 10 minutes a day to shut off all the distractions around you, go off by yourself and just to get quiet. And when you sit quietly with yourself, it's going to enable you to kind of calm down and get out of the sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of that fight or flight and that constant stimulation. You can get back into a parasympathetic nervous system, which is more the rest and recovery. And you can start to listen to yourself. And a lot of these times we have all these questions with very few answers, and we're always looking externally for these answers. But more times than not, we have the answers internally. It's a matter of understanding, what we're looking for and listening to ourselves. And by getting quiet and sitting quietly with yourself, you can reconnect and understand, what you're looking for. Then also the answers, a lot of times, like I said, we have those deep inside of us. So I think once we kind of reestablish that connection is the first key. And the second key is to do something every single day that you can be proud of. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's turning off the TV 10 minutes earlier, reading a couple more pages in the book, playing with your kids for 10 minutes longer, eat 5 cookies instead of 6 cookies, whatever it is. Just find something that is pushing you to make you uncomfortable, because it's critical that we're uncomfortable on a daily basis in some capacity and that we can be proud of ourselves. And the last thing is just to find some way each day to make your life about more than yourself. And that might be just as simple as opening the door for somebody else, or saying hello to somebody, or, making a donation of money or of your time or of some assets, a pair of shoes, whatever it is. But just find some way every day to make a piece of your life about more than yourself. I think those three things are the best ways to get started. They're absolutely free to do, and will make a big change for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a few things that I've done. Like I do cold plunges, I go in the hot tub and then I go on like the cold pool outside, and it's not comfortable by any means, but I feel a lot better doing it. And I'm doing something that's making me uncomfortable every day.
Yep.
And it's, or like I'll have like a handful of microgreens at night. I just stuff them in my mouth and they don't taste good to me, but I chew them up, have water, swallow them, and it helps me. So why not? So like a little thing I can do.
What's funny is anytime you do stuff like that, and those are two great examples, or if you go work out, or if you turn off the television and read a book, or, whatever it is in that genre, for lack of a better term, or if you say you're going to work out and you don't want to work out, but you make yourself do it. Nobody has ever in the history of the world turned around and said, I wish I had eaten those vegetables, or I wish I hadn't worked out, or I wish I hadn't read that book, or whatever it is. It's funny, but we always turn around and say, I wish I hadn't watched as much television or eaten as much junk food, or I wish I hadn't skipped my workouts. So it's just funny is that it's still difficult for all of us. I still struggle with it on a daily basis, but every single time we make ourselves do it, we feel better in some small way.
So are you developing a program of being, uncomfortable for 5 minutes a day or are you just doing it through like encouragement, or like, is this formalized, or what does it look like?
So for my personal regimen, I guess you could call it, is, this is what I do. I train for 20, 25 hours a week. So I train sometimes 3 times a day, normally twice a day. And it could be anywhere from an hour to 6 hours. And then on top of that, it's, like you mentioned, is, the cold plunges and all the stretching, and I track all my diets and everything. So this is just kind of part of my life at this point. But that being said, that doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that I always want to do it. It's just, I know what my goals are, and I know what it's going to take to reach my goals, and I'm willing to do what that is. And sometimes it takes me longer than others to get going, to get motivated, but I know that's part of the game. As part of Dawson's Peak Foundation and Dawson's Peak, which is, what I'm helping with people on a personal basis, is that, I do provide one-on-one mentorship or advisory work on life, different challenges people are facing. So from diet and nutrition to motivation to workout programs, all that kind of stuff. And people can find out about that on Dawson's Peak, which is PEAK.com. And then also a number of corporate speaking gigs that are coming up. My new book, Strength and Surrender, is coming out on January 7th, 2025. And all this stuff is addressed in there. And there are direct actionable items in the book that people can take and start to apply immediately to their lives, which I think will make a material difference.
Well, very good. What's the best place for people to engage with you, even for mentorship or for your books? Like, where do you think they should start if they just feel like they got to do something, but they don't know what it is and they don't know how to start?
That's one of the hardest things. It's just overcoming inertia. It can be one of the biggest parts of the struggle. It's just get that ball rolling. And even if it's only an inch every day, every time you do it, it's going to get a little bit easier in some capacity. But the best ways are my personal site, which is Dawson's Peak, PEAK.com. And you can learn there about everything that I'm working on now, everything that I've done, the personal mentorship, the public speaking, and also that links to our foundation site, dawsonspeakfoundation.org. And then also Instagram is just at Dawson's Peak. And those are the best ways. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can reach out at info at dawsonspeak.com. And then, like I said, to get involved is you can see everything that we're doing. And then the book, which is going to be the ebook, audiobook, and paperback, are all coming out on January 7th. But we've already hit #1 new release on Amazon. So we're getting a great response already.
Well, that's great. Well, Dawson, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been very interesting, and I'm glad you do what you do and you're now inspiring others. So thank you for coming.
I really appreciate the time. I've enjoyed it. And look, we're all in it together. And the last thing I just leave people with is there really is nothing special about what I'm doing, in the sense that we're all capable of doing this kind of stuff. And you don't have to go out and climb Everest or row in an ocean, but we can find something comparable in each of our lives to where we're really kind of pushing ourselves in a mental, physical, spiritual, emotional level. And just remember that our lives are about more than ourselves. And that's really the way to find lasting happiness and lasting fulfillment and joy, is to live for others just as much as you're living for yourself.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.